Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 37 of Podcast vs. Enemies, a Destiny Massive Breakdowns show. This week, we continue our Season 19 Grandmaster breakdowns, touch on the Festival of the Lost Weaponry, and deliver a very special announcement. I am Impetus, and joining me as always are my co-hosts, Court and St. Kabir. Lads, we've got a lot to talk about today, so let's get into our thank yous and our housekeeping. St. Kabir, who do we have to thank today?
First of all, I want to give a shout out to Pablo1471 for the 5-star review from Great Britain. Said it was his favorite Destiny podcast by a long way, and it was still informative even though he's been playing since the beta. I really appreciate that, Pablo. If you would like to leave us a review, positive, constructive, either way, we would greatly appreciate that, and it greatly helps other people like Pablo find our show on Apple Podcasts and other platforms like that. We also got a shout out from Georgia O. Court got a DM just thanking us for the content that we were putting out and said that they have been listening into all the episodes recently and really enjoying the recommendations. So thanks again for the positive feedback. It is always appreciated. We also want to thank everybody that supports the show via Patreon, helps us host the show on various platforms and all of that stuff, pay for the hardware. And thanks for everybody that downloads and listens to each episode. It's honestly what keeps us going month after month, and we appreciate all of the support. Court, what are we talking about in this episode?
This is quite a bulky episode this week. We do have a big announcement we'll just talk about very shortly. But for this week's episode, we have the just some highlights to note from the most recent TWAB. We do have the Disgraced Grandmaster coming up. So we'll do a little overview with weapon and class build recommendations. We'll, of course, be doing some pain points and a breakdown for the Disgraced. And, of course, we'll be covering the Festival of the Lost 2022, Origin Trait, and some weapons. So, this is normally our section where we talk about housekeeping and podcast updates. And, boy, we have a substantial one. So, next episode, that is episode 38, we are going to be hosting a Q&A featuring some Bungie developers. We are really excited to announce this really special opportunity. We will be hosting not one, but two Bungie weapon designers. That's Vivian Bex and Chris Proctor. They will be joining us to talk about everything related to weapons, exotics, perks, and general interactions within and focus towards the PvE sandbox. I do believe this is Vivian's first time on a podcast, so we do look forward to providing a platform to hear what she's been working on. And of course, some of you will be very familiar with Chris Proctor. Massive Breakdown patrons were also given the exclusive opportunity to submit some questions to this Q&A. Other than that, we don't want to give too much away for this special episode. I will say that this Q&A will replace our regular scheduled episode, which was going to be Exodus Crash. But, I guess we'll do that another time. Nothing of value was lost.
Oh no.
So this is also great timing as well, because Saint, of course, will be getting married very shortly. So he will be off for the next few weeks for his wedding and his honeymoon. And Impetus and I can take a little bit of a break because we've been on the podcast bonanza recording spree over the last week. And looking really forward to it. We are recording probably by the time this episode goes up, we'll be round about the time we'll be recording that Q&A episode for the following week. So really looking forward to that. But yes, this episode will focus on, and as normal, we'll talk about what we've been doing last week in Destiny. I'll kick us off. I am now a Kingslayer. And I do want to thank everyone who jumped in to do these master challenges. It was a lot of fun, really great vibes. And it's lots of fun. The challenges, at least the first couple of encounter challenges were a lot of fun. I think, Golgroth was maybe the last challenge where it was like, yeah, this is pretty entertaining. And then Daughters and Orcs challenges were a bit like, it's all right. It's all right. Outside of that, we just, of course, been doing Festival of the Lost stuff. I did sadly miss out on the Patron Crucible private matches over the weekend that Saint was organising. I do hope to join in that in the future. And really outside of that, I've been taking a break from Destiny and my sheets just to sort of avoid the the burnout. I did pick up some games. Airport CEO, I've been playing a lot of. I am a big fan of business/construction simulation games, so been really enjoying that the past few days. I do hope to pick up Modern Warfare 2022 at some point too, just to get back to my Call of Duty roots. And yeah, outside of that, lots of stuff been going on, lots of things to announce, lots of things that we've been keeping secret from our viewer base and listeners and that from the Discord. And for me personally, been a lot of things happening. Fallout put me on one of his recent videos. I want to sort of return the big shout out that he gave me, because I was the first one of many great places of source, or people that you want to go and speak to if you want to know exotics and interactions and all that, how things stack. And he put me at the start of his video, which
in
is
the thumbnail, my man.
Yes, the Halloween version of my my gavel emote.
It's immortalized now.
I would have gave him the original one, the green one, but he went and picked the really crusty one. But yeah, big shout out to Fallout. He is just superb content creator for Destiny, and go follow him if you haven't already. Impetus, what have you been up to?
Been running Festival of the Lost Haunted Lost Sectors, getting candy, unlocking new masks, having a lot of fun, trying to get some of the updated and new weapons. I did go flawless in trials for one last stab at the Adept Reads Regret. That was this weekend that we are recording. Got a Hipfire Grip Adagio roll for my troubles, so if you need anything from me for the rest of the weekend, I will be lying on the floor in the fetal position, crying my eyes out. Did finally get a 1580 class item to drop, so I can now play GMs. So looking forward to doing that this upcoming week, getting through those, getting my Conqueror title gilded. Saint, how about you?
This is Master Oryx Challenge Week, which turns out is not too much of a challenge, but either way, still progressing. Also got the Clan Night Triumph with some buds from our new branch in Clan Truth, which is great. Love to see that keep expanding season after season. I missed the very first Master Challenge, though, on Totems or Basilica, so I'm going to have to wait until Tuesday night of this week, and then I will finally also get my Kingslayer title, which has been very exciting. It's been a fun grind overall, great raid, been enjoying going through that a lot this past season. And the Massive Breakdowns Community Crucible Night, we hosted one of those for the first time. We had 20-something people show up, a lot of patrons out there hanging out, playing against each other, figuring out that Rock DC is, in fact, a menace to not be trifled with in his Breach GL. But, that was a really good time, just setting up, casual, private matches, random teams and maps and stuff like that. Really good. Really hoping to develop on that, maybe some future, Crucible focused events for the patrons and stuff like that in the future, or server tournaments or whatever it may be. Always love seeing people just getting involved and getting furious at each other because they just got headshot for the third time in a row. And that's just great to see. But we're not here to talk about the Crucible. All right. We're here to talk about some PvE, and we'll start off with some loot, some highlights from the most recent TWAB. This is from October 20th. The loot pool rotations have just been announced in Iron Banner, Trials, and the Nightfall. So the following weapons will be rotating out at the end of the season. In Iron Banner, we have the Forge's Pledge Pulse Rifle and the Reese Walker Shotgun. In Trials of Osiris, we've got Aisha's Embrace and the Reed's Regret, just mentioned. In Nightfall, we have Silicone Aroma and the Duty Bound Auto Rifle. We're not sure about the Season 19 weapons that are going to be cycled in, so to say, but we'll be hearing more about that as we get closer to the season, probably sometime in November. We'll be getting some updates about what is getting added into the pool to replace what is leaving here. They also hinted at a little legacy focusing for Season 20. Quote, one of the many aspects of the game that players will be learning more about when we get closer to Lightfall. So not exactly sure how we're going to target older loot this way or what that's going to look like. But there's definitely going to be some effort to help players capitalize on opportunities that may have been missed in the past, seasonal weapons, things like that. And that's something that I think that we've been continually more conscious of, right? As we've done more and more weapon breakdowns of not only what are the weapons that compare to the one that we're talking about, but also like, could you reasonably go get one of those other guns in, an hour, 2 hours, or are you at the mercy of Xur's RNG and this type of a thing? So it'll be nice to see some of those older weapons have a chance to be obtained again. That's about it for the TWAB. Not a ton of details there, so we can jump into our activity overview. Impetus, what are we talking here?
We are talking the Disgraced Grandmaster Nightfall. That is coming up this week. We believe the weapon that will be dropping in the Adept form will be Militia's Birthright. Again, that schedule kind of got potentially put out of whack by the swap that happened about 2 weeks ago in the Light Blade. There was an issue with the Mindbender's Ambition shotgun. It was not dropping with an extra perk, so it was swapped out for the Horror's Least Pulse Rifle. Hopefully it's just a simple swap and it won't mess up any of the other weapon rotations, but that has not been confirmed. So what we have is Militia's Birthright on our schedule for what will be coming up here. It may be the case, may not be the case. You'll probably find out real quick if it is not the case. So that is the Adept weapon dropping from the Disgraced. Inside the Disgraced itself, we have our 2 champion types, Barrier and Unstoppable. For the Barrier, our mods this season going to be Auto Rifle, Scout Rifle, and Sniper Rifle. And then for Unstoppable, we have Pulse Rifle, Shotgun, and the Solar Melee. The 2 shields you will see in here are going to be Arc and Solar. There is an Arc burn in this GM, so that is 25% increase in your outgoing Arc damage and a 50% incoming increase in enemy Arc damage. We also have another activity modifier, the Fire Pit. That is, Acolytes will spawn pools of fire that deal damage over time when they are defeated. So just something to be aware of here. A couple of notes. Navoda is the boss of the Disgraced. She has a solar shield that does regenerate when she appears. We'll talk a bit more about her boss fight, but it is pretty important here to just have a solar weapon or something that can break any type of shield with ease when you are going into that boss room, as she will repeatedly show up with that solar shield intact, and then it will regenerate over time during the damage phases. So just something to be aware of before you go in. Want to make sure that you have an ability to break a solar shield. A lot of Cursed Thrall as well. Definitely want to be aware of that. And then the most common source of arc shields are going to be Boomer Knights. So want to make sure you mind those 3 big things. Those are kind of the noteworthy enemies in here. All right, let's talk some weapons here. Got a lot of recommendations, a lot of different ways you could go into this GM, which is nice. We'll start off with our primaries. On the exotic primary side, you've got Hardlight for shields, and then a barrier capability with the mod. Risk Runner is going to be very nice in here. You won't be able to deal with champions with this weapon, but the ability to chain arc damage between enemies is going to make for a really potent crowd control source. Another thing to note with the exotic primaries, if you have a ammo finder mod on for either your special or heavy weapons, you will have the highest chance of spawning that ammo brick if you are using an exotic primary to generate kills. So another reason to consider Risk Runner or Hardlight or Trinity Ghoul. Again, doesn't have a champion mod that is relevant to this GM. We do have Overload Bow this season, but there are no Overload champions in here. But Trinity Ghoul will be able to pop your arc shields and then also do some pretty decent crowd control by splitting that lightning off to any nearby enemies. So just something to be aware of. You don't have to use an exotic primary, but there are some pretty compelling reasons to run it if you so choose. On our legendary primary side, we're looking at pulse rifles, auto rifles, and scout rifles to stick to our champions. So we'll start off with pulse rifles here. Just going to be recommending Arc and Solar for our primaries. Again, energy primary is kind of the most consistent recommended strategy here for comprising our loadout. So the 2 Arc pulse rifles we'll recommend Insidious and Horror's Least. On the Solar side here, you've got the BXR Battler and the Ogma PR6, both fantastic PvE options. On the auto rifle side, 2 Arc auto rifles to be aware of, Come to Pass and Sweet Sorrow. Those are both craftable. And then on the Solar auto rifle side, we have the Summoner from Trials and the craftable Amit AR2. Moving on to scout rifles, Got some great options here on the solar side, Staccato 46 and Vision of Confluence, and then on the arc side, Tarnished Metal and Eternal Blazon. Moving on to special weapons. In the exotic slot, we've got 3 fantastic options here. Obviously, Arbalest, it's a staple in every GM loadout at this point. Izanagi's Burden, also really strong here. You can pair that with Anti-Barrier Sniper Rifle to deal a lot of damage to champions and any other high-level enemies giving you problems. And then, of course, Wither Horde. We'll talk about the space and the size of the rooms and areas within this GM, but it is a very cramped GM, all things considered. So Wither Horde is going to be especially useful for locking down spawn areas, whether that's a door or a teleportation in, if you know where to look. So definitely consider Wither Horde here. On the legendary side, again, sniper rifles have an anti-barrier capability here, so I'll run through quick recommendations. On the solar side, we have the Uzume and the Long Walk. On the arc side, we have the Mashaber, Adored, and then we also have some kinetic options here. Thoughtless and Defiance of Yasmin would be excellent for rounding out your elemental primary. We also have breach-loaded grenade launchers, again, if you want to run the either a blinding or a more offensive option. For blinding grenades in the kinetic slot, you've got Ignition Code, Pardon Our Dust, fantastic for locking down some cursed thrall that might be rushing towards you. On the energy side, Salvager, Salvo, and Forbearance are both arc, fantastic options. You can get chain reaction on both of those, really, really fantastic crowd control. Solar ones, Empty Vessel and Explosive Personality. Empty Vessel does also roll with blinding grenades, very useful there. It's solar. And then Explosive Personality is our solar waveframe grenade launcher, dropping from 2 seasons ago and is craftable. So definitely some options there. And then shotguns. We have Unstoppable Shotgun. Got a few options I want to shout out here. Fortissimo and Wastelander in the kinetic slot. Mindbender's Ambition and Without Remorse as solar. And then Matador 64 and then either Inquisitor if you play Trials, or Found Verdict if you happen to have a good time loss roll that from Vault of Glass. Those are your 3 arc options there. Rounding things out with heavies, we're going to start with exotics. Thunderlord is probably one of the best crowd control arc exotics that you can have. It does have overload inherent, so you won't be able to take advantage of the champion aspect there, but again, for quickly mowing down enemies and then getting that thunder strike or lightning strike to deal a little bit of crowd control in a surrounding area, it's pretty top tier. Anarchy continues to be an excellent option here. Damage over time, you got to take advantage of the burn. Xenophage, very strong for busting the solar shields, can be very helpful for crowd control. You're more than welcome to use that against Navoda to pop that solar shield when it shows up. On the legendary side, we're going to recommend machine guns here. Going to be very, very potent as crowd control options. Don't really need to worry too much about rocket launchers and linear fusion rifles. Again, on the boss room, it's a smaller space, so rocket launchers can be a little bit risky depending on if you can back up farther enough away from the enemy that you're trying to hit. Linear fusion rifles can be a little bit tricky to hit crit spots as the boss will move around. Just, have a talk with your fire team. You're welcome to bring in LFRs, but this is not really a fight where you need to be putting up a lot of damage in a short amount of time. You can kind of take things slow just with how the boss fight works, so a machine gun is going to serve you perfectly fine. If you happen to visit Zur this weekend, he was giving a 7 Seraph Saw with auto-loading Vorpal Weapon. That's a perfectly fine roll in here. You could also consider Swarm and a Fine Memorial as 2 other viable arc machine gun options. You also have Fixed Odds and Avalanche as solar machine guns. Those would be excellent in here. And then you also have Chain of Command. That is last season's ritual weapon. It's stasis, but it did roll with osmosis, so you can turn it into an arc or any other element really that you want to just by throwing a grenade, as long as you have osmosis equipped there in that column 4. So again, plenty of options here. Just look through your vault, talk to your fire team, see who has what. And this is going to be a pretty open to experimentation kind of a GM. You're not really restricted to any one thing, so figure out what works best for your team and go nuts in there with the weapons. We'll touch on mods before jumping into subclasses here. So, of course, on the artifact mods, these are our seasonal exclusive options. Thermoshock plating on your chest piece for that arc and solar resistance. Really, really going to recommend that. You You could also run Inferno Whip and Focusing Strike if you want to lock down these solar melee for unstoppable champions. Something to consider there. And then for our regular mods, Concussive Dampener is going to be very helpful, as is Arc Resist. Navota's blasts that she fires out are going to be arc damage, so get a little extra resistance on top of the arc resistance that Thermoshock Plating gives you for when you're in that boss room. All right, that's our weapon and mod talk. Let's actually get into our subclasses here. I'll pass you off to Court to talk about the Hunter recommendations.
Yeah, so if you've listened to the last couple of episodes, this will be the exact same build that I've been recommending. And this particular strike really benefits from all 4 of the arc keywords. You're going to be getting your Amplified and your Speed Boost. You're going to be spawning Ionic Traces really easily here. And you'll be blinding and jolting like nobody's business, just because of the tight rooms and really a lot of ads as well. This is really quite dense strike for ads. So yes, Shinobu's Vow with either Gathering Storm or Arc Staff. Maybe more of a case here with Arc Staff because you're in close quarters, may have more potential than Gathering Storm. Yes, Gathering Storm is really good, but it is very specific to one area. You know, there's a lot of damage happening in a circle, whereas you can at least, you know, with Arc Staff playing in with the whole loop here, you clear out some of these tight rooms with Arc Staff, but it's really entirely up to you. Gambler's Dodge again, Skip Grenades again. Melee is free choice. I prefer Disorienting Blow because it's a really easy blind and amplified provider. For aspects, Flow State, Tempest Strike, or Lethal Current. It's really up to you. Again, I've spoken about the sparks before. I will just sort of give them a little bit more detail in this episode. So beacons, we have, if you're amplified, your arc special weapons will create a blinding explosion. I'll talk about that very shortly. Amplitude is killing enemies within a short time span, while your amplified creates an orb of power. And there is a 10-second cooldown. Discharge is your arc weapon kills progress a counter that spawns an Ionic Trace upon reaching 100%. It is a -10 strength. For low tier ads, so that will be your rank and file. That's 33% counter. For mid tier, that's 67%, and that will be, I think, everything up to elites. And high tier will be your anything that's mini boss, champion, bosses, stuff like that. Will just give you 100%. You are guaranteed an Ionic Trace. And once again, that does have a 10-second cooldown. And then finally, you've got Spark of Shock, which is pretty simple. Your arc grenades now apply Jolt, and you'll be doing plenty of that with Skip Grenades. Skip Grenades are not powerful by themselves, but being able to apply Jolt across a wide area is really great. And especially, again, just want to really highlight in this particular strike, you're going to be seeing a lot of that. For specific mods, just playing into the whole kind of power fantasy here, you want to go for Harmonic Siphon, which is your matching your elemental weapons to your subclass. Gives you that orb of power, so you could potentially spawn 2 orbs every time you proc Amplitude. Font of Might, tie that in with your arc weapons, 25% damage. High Energy Fire, again, it's another 20% empowering buff. Elemental Charge and Elemental Ordnance. Good to have. You could go for Bomber and Bolstering Detonation. And it's entirely up to you if you want to really go down the Skip Grenades, like get your firepower in there as well. That is entirely up to you. I've mentioned this before in the last couple of episodes. It's not my particular playstyle, but this one's more focused on, or I should say it's less focused on the grades that, you know, they are doing some serious work, and you'll get them back really quickly. But I'm also focusing on getting my arc weapons and orbs of power for the rest of the team and myself. So of course I have talked about this many times, and a quick reminder about sort of weapons that you might be wanting to pair this with. So essentially, for your arc special weapon, you want to go for Chain Reaction or Reservoir Burst to capitalize on that wide blinding effect that you can apply. So examples: Forbearance, Salvager's Salvo, Midas Reckoning, plug 1 if you've got any of that in your vault. But normal arc specials can do just as fine. Salvager's Salvo, of course, can be purchased directly at the Tower Weapons kiosk for some endgame currency. In terms of the other weapons, free slot in your kinetic or your primary slot. And for your heavy, been recommending heavy machine guns here. I'd probably go for the old reliable, and that is Thunderlord. That is a really superb ad clearing machine. Yes, we don't have overloads in this strike, but overload being able to cause disruption does have an effect against other combatants. It's a 25% damage reduction if you apply disruption on those ads. So you can apply that on the boss, and it'll do and she'll do 25% reduced damage. In terms of stat spread and the gameplay loop, I have mentioned this before. It's up on the builds, the build crafting forum as well, so I won't go to too much detail. I will talk about our second build here. So that's the arc build. Second build, which I probably would be going towards. This is really, hunters really capitalize on the slowing and freezing potential. So this will be the stasis subclass build that I've talked about again before. This will be your Renewal Grasps with Agar Scepter. If you don't have Renewal Grasp, you can go for Frosties. You're pairing this with Dustfield. For the aspects, you've got Touch of Winter and Grim Harvest. For the fragments, you've got Hedrons, Chains, Shards, Conduction, and Rhyme. And for specific mods, there's two sort of sub-builds with this build that I'm talking about, which is also up on the forum. You can go down the Ordnance mods with Font of Might, which is very similar to the build I was talking about with Arc there. You can sort of, jack of all trades, not really necessarily master of one. You've got the potential to get your grenade back really quickly, but you can also power up your stasis weapons. You can go down that route, but for this one, probably be best going down the firepower mods route. So pair that with Elemental Shards, Elemental Charge, Firepower times 3, and you'll get 45% grenade return, which consumes 1 charge of light stack per grenade throw. Impact Induction, just to give that 20% grenade energy on melee hits. Bomber, if you've got 1 copy, that's 14%. And either High Energy Fire or Font of Might, if you want to swap 1 firepower with one of those. So it's a pretty specific and advanced build here, but it's really helpful. Again, going to be really hammering down on the point that this is a very tight and close quarters Grandmaster strike. So stasis is going to be a really great friend for hunters here. I won't go down the gameplay loop because I've talked about this before, but in terms of like the sort of main loop, the firepower mods, when you're slowing and freezing and defeating them, they will spawn stasis shards. Collecting them will amplify your builds. And if you're throwing your dust field grenade, it will provide grenade energy back because of grenade chargeable light mods. And you just repeat and supplement impact induction and bomber to close out any gaps. So when you collect a stasis shard, which you can also track because of conduction, provides health and a stasis overshield thanks to Whisper of Rhyme, and also provides that charge of light stack for firepower, and you'll get that -1 charge of light stack every time you throw a grenade, and you can remove 1 firepower to put in High Energy Fire or Font of Might. But in terms of this strike, you're not really, this is more of an ad clearing strike. It's not really pivoted towards you've got a big boss at the end and you want to really destroy them. It's not really the case in this particular strike. But yeah, that's my 2 recommended builds. Again, I've talked about them a lot more in detail in previous episodes, and they're all up on the Massive Breakdowns Discord server for all the builds that we talk about. What can the Titans expect there, Saint?
To no one's shock, I'm going to be recommending our Zeus build yet again. I'm going to change this
You
out
don't
just
say.
a little bit. Yeah, I know, right? Who would even run storm grenades right now? Okay. And this one, I'll just recap this. You're just using Thunder Crash, Heart of Inmost Light, Storm Grenades. You need Touch of Thunder and Knockout for your aspects. And then on my fragments, Magnitude for grenade duration, Recharge for grenade energy when I'm critically wounded, Shock for arc grenades, jolting targets, and then Ions for jolted targets to create ionic traces, which also plays in if I'm using a Volt Shot weapon or something like that, which is great. The one thing I will say about this is beacons, which Court was mentioning just a second ago, is very, very valuable. And there are a lot of tight quarter situations where that comes into play. So there are some situations where I'll swap out my recharge for beacons because the shock and ions and my elemental wells are doing a lot for me already. I don't necessarily need recharge. So if I am going to be using an arc special, I'll be swapping that for beacons just for the utility there. On the mod set, I'm going Elemental Ordnance and Explosive Wellmaker and Well of Life, but then I'm also going to use Elemental Charge and just one copy of Firepower. You could use 2 copies of Firepower here. It's 15%, so Court was getting 30 or 45% from 3 stacks, which is a ton. Even 1 stack will give you 15%, which is a nice boost when you are adding it into the loop of something like Heart of Inmost Light, which is why I think that it's only really worth running multiple stacks of Firepower if you are going to be trading out your Heart of Inmost Light for Curus of the Falling Star and want to be dealing damage to champs that way or something like that. But if you're going to be using Hoyle, just use 1 copy of Firepower, and your Explosive Wellmaker and an Elemental Ordnance will create Arc and Solar Wells. This will give you, it'll give you 2 stacks of Charge with Light every time you pick up an Arc one, so you'll be able to throw 2 nades and then get those loops back. Whenever we are looking at the actual gameplay loop, you want to dash through your grenade. That'll get that initial 10 or 15% buff. You collect your traces, your ionic traces, and your wells. You get charged with light. You melee, dash, throw a grenade again. This loop just perpetuates super easily. I am gonna change my fragments based on my loadout, like I said. So the 2 versions of that are, I like to use Witherhoard with a Sweet Sorrow and the 7 Seraph Saw, and that would be good because it's also going to work with my Explosive Wellmaker, which is kind of nice, just extra wells, extra healing, always good. And then I also like to use a Wishender with a Forbearance is my personal choice. I get Salvage or Salvo. People like to hit things out of the air. There's some Shriekers and stuff like that where Forbearance just wouldn't be a good option. But the health on it is really great, and we still have an artifact mod boosting that. So second loadout would be Wishender, Forbearance, and a Storm Chaser. And both ways I'm using this, I'm going to get Explosive Wellmaker either for my Arc GL or for my Witherhoard, as well as the grenades. I get an Elemental Charge, Firepower, all this stuff is flowing really well. If you find that Well of Life and your Forbearance or whatever you may be running are not quite enough health, you can run a Solar subclass, our classic Lorelei build here. Nothing really crazy. Lorelei, Hammer, Soul, throwing Hammer, Soul Invictus, Roaring Flames is going to be kind of our core set here. I would push you towards Solar Grenades because there's a lot of areas where you have enemies charging at you, or there are areas where you want to close off a hallway or throw a grenade on a door. So I really like Solar Grenades for this just because of their massive AoE. And then I'd also be using Inferno Whip and Focusing Strike, which we mentioned earlier on. I'm going to keep a pretty standard mod set here with the Elemental Ordnance, Melee Wellmaker, Explosive Wellmaker, Well of Life, and Well of Ordnance for just extra grenade energy. I'm using Well of Ordnance because it's a really cheap mod, and I'm going to want to be using Anti-Barrier Sniper on my gauntlets for the loadout that I would run with this as well. So I like to, kind of work my way around there. It's not quite Firepower, but it does up the return that you get to your grenades whenever you are picking up a Solar Well, which is nice. For the loadout on this one, I'm going to be running Secession, Risk Runner, and 7th Seraph Saw. I love Risk Runner because it's between Lorelei and Risk Runner here, it's I can't say it's going to be hard to die. Like, we are still in a GM, but like, man, if you want to be a tank, that is the route right there. Risk Runner or Loreley, your healing is going to make you feel just about as tanky as you possibly can in a GM scenario like this. And, Overload Bow is also a great one when you're talking about Trinity Ghoul. And the Overload effect is still nice. Even if I'm not going to be stunning champs, the Overload effect that we talked about in our whole champs breakdown a few episodes back is still nice if I'm not going to be running Risk Runner. But yeah, the DR there, if you are looking to stay alive, you're new to GMs, Loreley plus Risk Runner, some Solar Grenades is going to keep you alive really, really well. That's all I got for the Titans. Impetus?
All right, Warlocks, let's talk Arc and let's talk Stasis. I'm going to push everyone towards Arc, but if you're going into this for the first time, if you're new to GMs, if this is one of your first ones, I do think there is a case to be made for Stasis, running a Stasis build here. So I'll actually start with that build first. Shadebinder is going to be very effective in here, as are your turrets that we get from Osmiomancy Gloves and the Bleak Watcher aspect. So again, tight spaces, you can really lock down entire ad waves that spawn in with that Bleak Watcher going ham, and then when you do have your super, you can just completely delete the battlefield by freezing and shattering there. We're using Cold Snap Grenades by using Osmiomancy Gloves. Your melee is actually going to come to play a lot here just due to how close enemies are, and especially with the invisible marauders and the number of regular and cursed thrall that just love to get up close to you. Having that instant freeze melee is going to be huge here. So I've also added Glacial Harvest as my second aspect to really work on getting those stasis shards to make sure that I have both my grenade ability and my melee ability back as quickly as possible. When we look at our fragments here on Stasis, I'm using Whisper of Torment, getting that grenade energy each time I take damage from targets. Again, just cycling out as many of those turrets as possible. Got Whisper of Conduction. That is, nearby Stasis shards are tracking in my position. I also get a stat increase to Intellect and Resilience, which is very nice to have. Got Whisper of Rhyme, getting an overshield when I pick up that Stasis shard. Falls off after 10 seconds. We always like that, especially if you do get surrounded by invisible enemies. Every extra bit of survivability, it does matter there. And then, of course, Whisper of Durance, making sure that that slow for my abilities lasts longer. So that's really just making sure those turrets are as devastating and annoying for our enemies as possible. When we look at the mods, I'm really just supercharging my grenades here. So we are using the absolutely essential mod here is going to be Elemental Shards. That turns my Stasis Shards into Stasis Elemental Wells. Very, very important for getting ability energy. And then what am I doing by making them Stasis Elemental Wells? I'm pairing it with Well of Restoration, making sure that my Stasis Elemental Well gives me additional energy for the ability that has the lowest. So that's especially useful since I'm not speccing into the Strength stat. I can get that melee back even quicker by having those Stasis Shards give me even more melee energy. I'm also using Elemental Charge, picking up Elemental Wells since we're on the Stasis subclass. Using Elemental Shards, all of my Elemental Wells that I'm generating will be Stasis, so I get 2 charges or 2 stacks of Charge with Light. After that, you can really go in either way. Again, Firepower is kind of the one that I always, the Charge with the Light mod that I typically recommend. If you are having trouble staying alive, you need an additional source of healing, you can definitely go with Heal Thyself. I think that's a fantastic option. Really, it'll just come down to your experience, your comfort level. If you want more grenades, Firepower is the play. If you want to get a little bit of health, Heal Thyself, fantastic option. So this build, again, for absolute crowd control. The big thing that we want to be aware of is whenever champions are on the field, right? Turrets can be quite annoying, especially with the unstoppables. With barriers, if you're able to freeze them right before they get their shield off, that can be beneficial, but you're going to need to know when a champion is getting ready, a barrier champion is getting ready to pop that barrier before you freeze. And with turrets, you don't really have control over when that freeze is happening. So just try to keep the turrets to a minimum when there's a champion on the field. We always want to prioritize killing champions first. So after those champions go down, feel free to throw out the turrets to help clear out the ads, make the ads a little bit more manageable before they start to overwhelm your fire team. But again, this is really, I think, a more of a newbie-friendly build here. For more experienced GM players, I'm going to recommend the Arc subclass here. We've got a lot of different options in our exotic weapon. Storm Trance, going to be the super of choice here, can really, really shine. Again, it's just, you got such tight quarters. It's going to be hard for enemies to get away from those Palpatine fingers of yours. So definitely Storm Trance as the super of choice here. For the exotics, I've got 3 here. Getaway Artist, going to be really useful. If you do, if you're running machine guns, you really want to make sure you have enough heavy ammo dropping. I think Aeon Souls is going to be very effective here. Again, this is not unique to Warlocks. Anyone can run the Aeon gauntlets. But just something to be thinking about if you really do need some help with that heavy ammo spawning. And then Fallen Sunstar will be my 3rd recommendation. We have a lot of opportunities to generate ionic traces. There's a lot we can do with those on Fallen Sunstar. For the grenade, it's going to be Storm. Such a powerful tool here. Really, really strong. Melee, Ball Lightning. I like having a ranged melee here, especially for those Cursed Thrall if they do sneak up on you. For the aspects, regardless of what exotic armor you're using, Arc Soul and Electrostatic Mind are going to be the recommendations here. Just classics, really. They give so much, and I don't think the charged melee from our 3rd aspect is worth it here. I know it's very fun to play with, but due to how enemies can suddenly be in multiple spots at once, just because you're able to get away from one group of enemies with that dash, you could very well end up appearing in front of a new group of enemies. So I would say unless you're extremely, extremely competent with how that melee ability works with the slide into the blinking effect, I'm probably just going to recommend everyone else stay on Arc Soul and Electrostatic Mind. For our fragments here, so if you are running Getaway Artist with the Arc Soul, we're going to lean into that here. I have Spark of Shock for the jolting on the arc grenades, kind of a classic at this point. Pair it with Spark of Ions to get another ionic trace if you want. Spark of Recharge, again, just getting that melee and grenade energy back quicker. And then, of course, Spark of Magnitude to boost the power of the Storm Grenade. If you're wondering why Arc Souls, again, we don't have a radar here. That's true for the GMs, all GMs. So Arc Souls can serve as kind of a poor man's radar to prevent you from being surrounded. They do just automatically target enemies. They will typically target whatever enemy is closest to you. So if you have the Arc Soul popped and you don't see, you hear it firing, but you don't see the bolts, that's probably because it's firing at an enemy that's behind you. So it can just help to kind of increase your general area awareness. And again, in the boss room in particular, depending on where you're standing, you will have a lot of enemies in different spots in front of you, on your sides, and to the back of you. So just popping that Arc Soul, becoming amplified immediately with Getaway Artist, having that Arc Soul just continually be on a swivel can be your little eyes in the sky if you want to think about it like that. As for Fallen Sunstar, I do have a support build that I mentioned a few episodes ago when we were doing our Arc 3.0 breakdown. I did specify in there that this was really designed for dungeons and raids. However, due to the small size of this GM, you will frequently have a lot of your teammates kind of next to you, close quarters, especially in the beginning and in the boss room. So I think this build could actually shine really well here. We're going to be generating ionic traces, and then we're going to be having a little bit of ability energy given to whatever teammates are nearby whenever we pick them up with Fallen Sunstar. I've then included some fragments and mods that also help us generate orbs of power for whatever reason our fire team may want to do with those. So I'll just briefly run down what that support build looks like with Fallen Sunstar. We're kind of using Spark of Amplitude to generate the orbs of power. And then again, because we're going to be next to each other, we also want to focus on generating ionic traces so that our fire team members can get a little bit of an energy boost whenever we pick up an ionic trace. So I'll just talk about some of the mods real quick for Charge with Light and then circle back around to weapon choices that will take advantage of ionic traces. So on the mod side here, we've got a few siphon mods. You could do a kinetic siphon if you have something like Wither Horde. That'll generate orbs of power with some multi-kills, which will be excellent. You can also go with Arc or Harmonic Siphon if you really want to take advantage of something like Risk Runner or some of the other Arc exotic specials that I'll touch on in a moment. We've got Radiant Light and Powerful Friends here. This is really just increasing the ally effects for getting charged with light and then making sure that they have those stacks available for whatever reason they may want them. Kind of a surprise one that I've thrown in here is Striking Light. So defeating combatants with melee damage or swords spawn in one orb of power for your allies. I know that we said we're not using the arc melee aspect, but one thing that we have an option to run in here, this is going to be kind of a risky option, but it does have a good payoff in my mind. Shotguns with the 1-2 punch perk would be really effective here. You can stun unstoppable champions with the weapon, but then also have a way to turn your melee into an incredibly lethal tool. So defeating targets with that 1-2 punch enhanced melee will be really, really helpful if you pair the Striking Light mod with it. That way you can get an orb of power for the allies. You're consuming your own stacks of charge with light. But again, if you have something like taking charge on, you're going to be picking up plenty of orbs of power anyways, especially if you already have siphons. So just something to be aware of if you want to try it out. I think it will be quite potent in here. Again, close quarters, you're going to be getting a lot of kills as long as you're amplified. You're going to be proccing Spark of Amplitude quite frequently as you can, because it has a 10-second cooldown. For generating the ionic traces, several different options here. We have the new fusion rifle, Delicate Tomb, that dropped with this season. That will generate a bunch of ionic traces if you're interested in that. As a bit more of a medium to long range option, Cold Heart now does frequently generate ionic traces when it's in the high damage state. That can be very, very helpful. Beyond that, though, I mean, those are my two recommendations really for generating the ionic traces. We have some fragments that can also spec into if we want. You would have to swap out some other things here. I think Recharge could probably go, if I'm being honest here. I would say Discharge would be the swappable one for Amplitude. That would be probably the best bet there, especially if you're doing Forbearance or Salvager Salvo with the Chain Reaction perk, really just getting those multi-kills off. That would be a quite potent build here. The last thing I'll say about Arc Fragments, again, if you are running Aeon Souls, you want to swap out, make sure that you're running Volts. That's going to be very useful there. You get amplified when you finish an enemy. That can be very useful in here when you go to finish the champions for heavy ammo. So final notes here on the Arc subclass. It's all about aggressive crowd control, really tight spaces in here so you can just easily abuse the spawn doors, storm grenades, Wither Horde, whatever, Salvager Salvo shot. Really, you'll just take out an entire ad wave. Storm grenades, of course, can also be a great way to apply Jolt to an entire ad wave, have that damage over time ticking for free. Very nice, especially if a champion's with them as well, get an extra damage in there as well. So those are my recommendations for Warlocks. We'll jump right into the GM now. We'll start off with that first room that we will arrive at after doing a short Sparrow bit. These are all going to be fallen enemies. We're going to have, this is kind of a interesting room. So you're going to run up the staircase, and you'll have a little room, and then that little room will be attached to a much larger area. You want to be careful you don't advance too far into the room here. We're going to have a lot of enemies already spawned in, including 2 barrier servitors. You want to make sure that the servitors are killed quickly. It's going to make killing the ads very difficult because they love to make their surrounding enemies immune. So barrier servitors need to be killed first. You're not going to have a great angle, though. That's the real difficulty here. So you'll have some of the windows, these open areas in that smaller room. That's what you're going to look through to shoot the barrier servitors. They won't really advance beyond the larger room into that smaller room. So you want to have that little stopgap where you're standing in the staircase, kind of shooting through the windows in that smaller room. And the reason we want to do that is because after about 20 to 30 seconds, you will have invisible marauders rush you, regardless of whether or not the servitors are dead. They are going to advance on you. So you want to make sure that you have enough time to call out when they approach, because you're not going to be able to see them through your radar, and it can be very difficult to see them actually in game if you're being shot at by a bunch of enemies. So we're going to be in the staircase. We're going to be shooting through the windows at the barrier servitors, trying to get them to die quickly, but we're also going to be keeping our head on a swivel for the invisible marauders that rush. When they do start to approach, you want to throw down a grenade, again, a Wither Horde, Anarchy, whatever you're using to do kind of just lock off physical space here. Make sure we can slow down the marauders, deal with them immediately, swap to a special or a heavy weapon to quickly burst them down. Then we go right back to dealing with the barrier servitors. After those are done, we can maybe move into that little room there. Again, we don't want to go into the main central area here because there's spawn points on all 4 corners of this rectangular room. We don't want to get overwhelmed. So you want to stay in that little area there, kind of clear out some ad waves. Once you get comfortable, maybe there's 3 enemies left, have a few of you advance into the main room here. But really, we're starting in the stairwell, dealing with the barriers, the invisible enemies. Then we move up to deal with the rest of the enemies. Only after they're all dead, then we can start pushing into the main room here. We don't want to get overwhelmed. This is a really silly section to die in, right? It's the very first area. So play it safe. It's going to go a little bit slowly. You'll get quicker and quicker as you can kill. But again, some of this is going to be RNG just because the barrier servitors are going to be at weird angles. I would not recommend finishing these enemies. These are not the champions that you want to finish. We'll have more sections later on when we get to the hive sections where you can go in and get a finish on barrier enemies in particular. So after you've dealt with this room, you're going to go upstairs. You're going to come out to kind of the exterior section. You will have hive fighting fallen enemies here. We'll start with the fallen enemies. Their backs will be to you as you approach. There's going to be 2 more barrier servitors and then a few minor tier fallen enemies. Again, we're not worried about finishing these enemies. You're going to have a lot of shots being fired off between these 2 races, a lot of enemy fire, so this is still a pretty risky one. If you do happen to have one barrier servitor that's a little bit closer, that's focused on you, sometimes it'll be inside, sometimes they'll both be outside. Maybe you can go for it. Again, you just want to be safe here. All right, if it's too risky, finish them off from a distance and then push outside. But if they do happen to bum rush you for some reason, take the opportunity if it's presented. Outside, after you've killed all the fallen, you will be faced with 2 wizards, as well as some acolytes, thrall, and then after a little bit, cursed thrall, and a few more knights here. So solar and arc shields are going to start to present themselves. Be aware of that. Start firing off those shots. We're going to take this engagement at a mostly to a medium-long range here. No need to push up. No need to make it harder. We're going to clear some of the smaller enemies first. You will have some shriekers that will open after a time, but really what we're looking at right now are going to be the 2 barrier knights that will show up on these little pillar platforms kind of at the far side facing outwards. So we want to work on them immediately. Again, scout rifles, sniper rifles, these are the reasons we use these weapons. This is the distance that we want to engage at here. It could be the case that the barrier knights might fall or slip off their platform and fall down as you're trying to burst them down. Do not rush them. There's really no need for you. Just stay back. They'll climb back up or jump back up onto that platform. If you're wasting special or heavy ammo, you're just going to have to consider it a loss. But really, I think a primary, like a scout rifle, using that as a barrier weapon is going to be probably the safest, most ammo-efficient method here. After those barrier knights are dead, the shrieker's going to start opening up. Absolutely focus on them immediately. Again, a machine gun, really smart play here. Have all 3 of you swap to that. Start firing that down, laying down fire, pop the shriekers. Then we can start moving up, working on any other enemies. If you want to, you can wait for the shriekers to open up if there happens to be a barrier knight still on the platform. Do the shriekers first and then go in for a finish on the barrier knight, depending on your ammo situation. But I'm not going to recommend that across all runs. Really, that's just something that you'll need to communicate with your fire team and see if that's necessary. After the shriekers and the first 2 barrier knights are down, we can start pushing out into the outside area. You will have 2 more barrier knights at the bottom of that ramp in the open area. These ones are probably a little bit safer to finish if you absolutely need to. Work on any of the ads that are around them. Obviously, clear out some space, stun one of the barrier champions, and then make sure that the other one is ready for the finish, but you don't want both of them firing at you as you're trying to go in. So play it safe here. After you've cleared out all these ads, we're going to go back inside, kind of run into that smaller room. You will have 2 barrier servitors in here, as well as invisible marauders and vandals. Again, marauders and vandals here are going to be a little bit tricky. You want to see if you can kill a barrier servitor, but again, these are pretty easy to finish just because of their proximity. So if you need to kill one of them and then go and finish the second one, definitely do that. But you do need to worry about those marauders, as they could be immune and they could be right up close to you trying to kill you. So just play it safe. If you can get a finish, great. If not, don't worry about it. There's no need to waste lives here. I mean, this is not the section that you should be dying to. So you want to make sure that you are as cautious as can be. This is not a particularly difficult GM, but you don't want to get risky trying to go for finishes. Just play it as safe as possible. After you finish off the enemies in this room, you do need to worry about some snipers that'll be further down the hallway there. If you can pick them off first, definitely go for it. But really, if you have the opportunity, try and finish the barrier servitors. They're probably the easiest barrier enemy to finish. But again, if there are marauders around, watch out, because they deal arc damage with those swords. They're invisible. They can be hard to see. If they sneak up on you and get a good few hits in, they will kill you quite quickly. So just be aware of that. Call them out when you see them so that your fire team does not have a nasty surprise. After this area, we're going to run all the way up to Navoda and the entrance to the boss room.
Yeah, next up, you will actually come face to face with a boss. Whenever she spawns in, you will have a mixed group of about 10 cursed and regular thrall, as well as 2 barrier knights. Throw some grenades down there, use the crates where you're at as cover, just moving back and forth, kind of baiting out some of those thrall to come closer to you, and you can kill all those guys off. After you've done a little bit of chunk to her health, and you have cleared out the barrier knights and the curse thrall, she'll move on back into the boss room, and then in the back there you'll have 1 major and 1 minor tier wizard, and then after you take them out, you can kind of move up and look to the left, and you'll see more curse thrall, a unstoppable ogre that is kind of coming down the hill towards you. If you stay where he is not able to see you, kind of out of his line of sight, and you're not engaging him, you can usually kill off the wizards and a few of the curse thrall, and then kind of move up a little bit, stun the unstop, take him out real quick, and then you'll need to look up to the balcony where you'll have a barrier knight. This guy's pretty deadly if you're not paying attention to him, just because he has a lot of reach from where he's at. So turn around the corner there, get your unstop ogre down, barrier knight up on the balcony, and then you'll have 4 more knights or so coming out of the room, a couple major tier, minor tier, arc shielded knights coming down, as well as I think a few minor enemies, not too many there. After you get through these knights, you will have a couple barrier knights that are usually going to hang out kind of in the back of the room. That's like the little transition room into the actual boss arena. So take out the arc shielded knights, move up a little bit, you'll run into the barrier guys that are kind of hiding back up in there in the room. Try to finish off at least one of these barrier knights, and recoup any ammo that you just spent on the champions and the unstop ogre from where you're going through. So feel free to be using your machine guns and stuff like that, because you'll have these last 2 barrier knights waiting for you right before you go into the boss room, and they're pretty easy to finish. Once you have finished your barrier knights, you've got your heavy ammo stocked up, you're jumping into the boss room. Remember, Navoda has that solar shield, and it will keep recharging, not just per damage phase, but anytime you don't damage her for long enough, it will just come right back up. Inside the boss room, we have basically 3 locations that we need to be watching out for enemy spawns. You've got the Hive Gateway Portal down kind of in the lower section of the room. You'll have a lot of little enemies phasing in and jumping down from the walls down there. You have the doorway spawns, which are kind of to the left side of the room. You have one on the far left, one in the middle, and then one up in a little smaller room section. And they also have some ceiling spawns. Just to the right of the doorway spawns, you'll have some enemies jumping down, thrall jumping down from the ceiling up there. When it comes to the actual boss fight, we're going to have a few different phases. You can see the boss's health bar is divided up into distinct 1/3 chunks. And in our first phase, she'll be kind of down by the gateway, going to be moving around a lot down there, just recharging that shield any time that she gets a chance, and is going to be out of your line of sight or damage or anything like that. This is a great place where your solar grenades or storm grenades that have a lot of AoE, a lot of damage over time type of a thing, can keep the shield down even when you're not looking. Or if you've got a player running Anarchy, you just throw a shot or 2 on her, kind of ticking her down is super useful in a section like this. When you get through about 50% of her first health bar chunk, you'll have some thrall spawn in throughout the room, and then when you get down to about a quarter of this health bar segment, you will have some, regular knights, minor, major tier, arch-shielded knights, as well as some acolytes come in from the doors. And then once you actually kill all these adds, Navoda is going to move up in the room to that catwalk, and then going to start attacking you from there, and you'll have more curse thralls and things like that spawning in as you are damaging the boss there. Court, what's going on next?
So we've got 2 more phases after this. We are onto the second phase, so this will be the sort of second, third health chunk. At this stage, she will remain on the metal catwalk, which... she'll remain there with a short despawn before reappearing later on. Again, she doesn't really move a lot in this metal catwalk, but her arc attacks can still be deadly at range. So you can find places to, just avoid that and just take the rest of this really methodical. So once you've expended about 25% of this health segment, Navota will despawn. Lots of adds will spawn from the doors, including acolytes and an unstoppable ogre. Once you've dealt with that unstoppable ogre and all the adds are dead, adds will then spawn from the Hive Gateway. This will also include another unstoppable ogre, some thralls, and a normal ogre. Once those have been killed, Novoto respawns back on the catwalk, and there'll be more thralls throughout the room that spawn. About 50% of this health segment, more thralls will spawn from the Hive Gateway and the ceiling spawn, and again this will happen at 25% left of this health segment. So by that point, you've got into the last third of her health bar. She will initially remain on that catwalk, though she will despawn after 5-10% into that last chunk. And she'll move her position back to the Hive Gateway, where she'll remain for the rest of the fight here. Again, just like the start, she's going to be quite jumpy. She's going to be, taking cover, recharging that shield. It's probably why we've been recommending, weapons that will be doing sustained damage here. You're not going to get a lot of worth here using rocket launchers or linear fusion rifles even, and that's quite rare, especially in the current sandbox. So machine guns, auto rifles, stuff that are going to be doing sustained damage will be the best go-to when it comes to going up against Navota. So again, sort of similar as before at 75% of the health bar. Once you've expended 25% of that, there'll be more thralls, and there'll also be more Arch Shield Knights from the Hive Gateway section and the ceiling spawns, and this will repeat again at 50 and 25% health bar segments. So it's pretty quite a robust strike, but once you've got the sort of groove, pretty simple enough. I think we can sort of agree here that for first timers, probably around about 30 to 45 minutes if you're taking it nice and slow and methodical. The boss room can slow things to a crawl. I think for repeat clears, once you've tidied up your strategy and sort of speeding through a lot of this, you'll be thinking maybe 20 minutes. Pretty simple strike here. What are we thinking about the most sort of taxing arena or encounter here?
I mean, the first room you walk into, people really get caught off guard by those marauders and stuff like that. And then I really don't think it's bad again until the end, and all the cursed thralls start spawning in, and people get a little overly focused on the champs and the bosses, and they just lose sight of where the cursed thrall are coming from and let them explode. But yeah, those are probably my biggest pain points, I think.
Yeah, I'd say, that first room, it's immediately like you have maybe 10 feet of movement when you first get it, because the enemies have already all showed up and they're already kind of in position for you, so you do not have a lot of time to kind of move around, and it can be really dangerous to reposition, so that can kind of be annoying. But that final room there in the boss, especially when the ogres start showing up, if you're in the bad spot, you can get squished, you can get beamed down quite quickly. That can just make things even more annoying to deal with. But once you know where they spawn in, when they spawn in, it really isn't. I would treat it personally as one of the easier GMs once you just know the spawn rotations. So.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm quite excited just to do this strike, because it is a nice strike to go in, take some builds in that you want to play around with, and you just experience the sort of add dense rooms, especially when it comes to arc and stasis. Those are your really top tier builds for all the subclasses when it comes to Grandmasters. So yeah, pretty simple enough this strike after a few runs, and once you get your strategy refined, you'll be breezing through it. All right, normally this is where we'd be finishing up the episode, but we haven't done a weapons breakdown segment for a few episodes. We're going to be covering the Festival of the Lost Weapons. So I will kick us off just talking about the new origin trait, which is called Search Party. The text reads, "This weapon is granted faster aim down sight speed and movement speed while aiming down sights when no allies are near." So the general consensus here is kind of works like threat detector. It's the inverse. So if there's no allies within 15 meters of you, that tends to be the sort of the go-to. 15 meters is the magic number. And while you're aiming down sights, you will have 2.5% reduced aim down sight movement penalty. So for layman terms, that's you move 2.5% faster while aiming down the sights. and it's roughly, still a lot of kind of technical stuff going in the background while we test some of these things. It's roughly a 15% ADS duration scaler. So again, in layman's terms, that's around about 15% faster aim down speed. And this works everywhere. It's not exclusive to any one place. I will pass you over to Saint, who's going to talk about a much mispronounced sniper rifle.
Yep, we're talking about the Mecha Bruh. It is a arc aggressive frame, 72 RPM, high damage and high recoil, and it is pretty much a direct competitor against our Iron Banner sniper rifle, the Occluded Finality. The biggest difference here, before I jump into the other stats, is going to be the zoom. Occluded Finality, I believe, is the highest zoom sniper rifle in the game at 5.8 times zoom. I'm sure some have heard of this in the past and kind of how that affects the accuracy and aim assist fall off of the sniper rifle and some things like that. But this is not always a popular trait with everybody. The Festival of the Lost sniper rifle only has 45 zoom. This is much more middle of the road between your typical 40 to 50, low to high zoom for your adaptive high impact sniper rifles and things like that, which I think is going to be the biggest thing that pushes people towards this sniper rifle despite the other stats. So when we start to look at the other stats, 74 range versus 75 unoccluded, 28 stability versus 29 unoccluded, 30 reload to 34, 41 aim assist to 47. Generally speaking, it's close, not quite as good, usually within 1 to 5 points on any given stat. But again, I think that zoom level is really going to make the difference for people that favor this weapon over the Occluded. And there's also a few traits in here that spice this thing up. Whenever I am picking a barrel and mag, I'm probably going to go for fluted, just for that plus 15 handling and plus 5 to stability. Aggressive frames, just don't have the best handling. And if I'm going to be using this in a loadout that I'm swapping onto and off of quickly, having that plus 15 handling is great. And the extra, just tiny bit of stability is always good for working against flinch. When it comes to my mag, I'm probably going to be picking a pended for the extra bullet in the mag, or maybe a flared, depending on the perks that I'm picking, which would be a plus 15 reload and plus 5 to stability. Really here, I'm looking for some handling. I'm looking for some reload or stability, all those. I'm not super picky, but I'm definitely not going to be taking anything that's going to be hugely pushing out my range in PvE, just because I just don't think the impact is going to be worth the stat points in PvE, although it can be, but that is going to be my usual preference. When we're looking at our main traits, we've got in column 3, all-loading holster, perpetual motion, con cartridge, and triple tap. Triple tap is historically a go-to DPS perk, but the magazine size being so low on a weapon archetype like this, I don't think is a great pick. I think that's like kind of a bait perk because you're only going to get triple tap to proc once unless you're using extended mag, a magazine mod. And as you know, we're not huge on using extended mag on our weapons here at PvE. So I'm probably going to push you towards auto-loading or clown cartridge on this one. In column 4, things heat up a little bit. We got Vorpal, high impact reserves, swashbuckler, and Volt Shot, which is the first time we've seen this on a sniper rifle, I believe. It's kind of working its way into the weapon pool here as it made its debut this season. So really nice to see this on a sniper, even though I know this is not something people would pick or be the go-to pick necessarily for a sniper like this. Masterwork and mod kind of depends on where your barrel and mag land, on basically just using your masterwork to kind of cover up or help out on whatever the barrel and mag didn't help you with. Handling, reload, anything like that is going to be nice. Again, depending on where that barrel and mag got you stat-wise. Definitely going to be leaning towards a major boss spec on this one because I want to be dealing damage to champions and things like that. Whenever we look out our possible builds, I think the anti-champ kind of go-to one would be auto-loading holster or clown cartridge with Vorpal. This is, if I'm using auto-loading, goes back to why fluted would be really nice to have that quicker handling, swapping on and off of this. The constant damage buff here is going to be really nice. If I am facing some anti-barrier champs, could even use it in the GM that we've just been talking about, honestly. This would be a fine role to use for your anti-champion weapon. It's going to deal solid damage, it's going to have good uptime, and it sounds fantastic. The next one I'm going to be looking at is kind of our arc build, our arc subclass focus build, especially if you're going to be leaning into this heavily, and that is a Perpetual Motion and Volt Shot. Perpetual Motion I threw in there just because it's giving me that extra little bit of reload speed, which is nice when I'm trying to proc Volt Shot quickly and then deal some damage out. Not necessary. Could also definitely go with Clown or something like that if you want to go for a bit of damage afterwards. But if you're able to set this up, takes obviously more effort than Vorpal, which is just working against any champion or boss that you come up against. But Volt Shot is going to be really good if you are able to take out a small ad and then turn to your, let's say our high barrier knight, right? And immediately jolt this guy and get a few crits on him is going to deal a lot of damage and help clean up anything remaining around him, or barrier servitor and something like that. So I think that's maybe not the most popular pick, but I think that one could be a lot of fun, and I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye out for that. And then lastly, auto-loading holster and swashbuckler. If you are going to be running some super heavy, thunderclap or like combination blow build, this could be fun. It's not really practical. Using swashbuckler on a sniper rifle is kind of like very it's like two ends of two different play styles, right? But it's in there. They put swash in a sniper rifle, and I think that may have honestly been more for the Crucible players, but it's a conversation for another time. Next up, we got an auto rifle.
Yes, this one is not new, but it has been updated to have both the origin trait and a few of our newer legendary perks. So we are talking about Braytech Werewolf. This is a kinetic precision frame auto rifle. That means the recoil pattern is more predictably vertical. Bungie continues to churn out kinetic precision auto rifles at a pretty steady rate, so there is a lot of competition here. We've got Tiger Spite, Seven Seraph Carbine, Firefright, and Horror Story around, so a lot of stat comparisons here. Braytech does come out pretty favorably, though. We'll start off at range, which is what it is best at. 69 range, that is best in class by a 7-point difference. We've got 41 stability, that is tied for first. 39 handling, it's about third. 42 reload is second best, and 47 aim assist, which is best in class. A note about the zoom, it is 16, which is second to Firefright's 17, but not bad at all. So arguably best in class for the base stats, but again, here in PvE, we care more about the perks, and that is where Braytech starts to stumble. So we'll touch briefly on our barrels and magazines here. With the range stat being so high, you really don't need to worry about it too much. I think the only thing that you would want to maybe worry about is if you want to get your damage fall off when you are aiming down sights to be over 30 meters. At base, it is just over 29, but you can quite easily hit 30 with a combination of something like ricochet rounds and then just the tiniest bump to range. So, small bore corkscrew would do it fine there. I don't think, again, hammer forged or say even extended barrel or full bore would be necessary. There's no need to hurt your stats on this weapon. It's not that impressive to be taking those kinds of risks. So, small bore fluted is probably still my number one recommendation. Given a sizable bump to handling and stability is going to be nice, especially if ricochet round is in your magazine perk. Speaking of magazine, though, we do have all 3 rounds perks in here. So ricochet, high caliber, armor piercing, any of those are going to be great in PvE. If you want a little bit of help on reload, you've got flared magwell, you've got light mag. Again, I don't think that's absolutely necessary, but that is up to you. Again, on the magazine size for just straight magazine perks, appended is here. That is the only thing I will recommend. Do not go extended mag. Do not go alloy. You don't need them. They're not giving you proper buffs here. On to columns 3 and 4. Again, this weapon has kind of surprisingly become more of a PvP weapon, so there are still plenty of good PvP perks here On the PvE side, it's kind of a mixed bag. So Pugilist has been added to column 3. Again, very, very strong perk. Excellent choice for a third column perk if you're interested in that. We do have Compulsive Reloader as well, and Well-Rounded. Subsistence returns as well. I think those are all fantastic options for specific stuff, but Pugilist can be really helpful because it pairs with Swashbuckler in column 4. So we can get a little bit of a melee build there between the synergy of those two perks. Gutshot Straight, nope, not interested. Vorpal Weapon on a primary, not interested. Under Over continues to disappoint as always. You do have Kill Clip here as well. I suppose you could go for a Compulsive Reloader Kill Clip roll if you're interested, but for me, I think Swashbuckler is going to be the best damage perk that we can go with because I compare it with Pugilist. Osmosis is also on here as well, so you could do a utility roll of Pugilist Osmosis if you're interested. I've said this before, but it's unfortunate that Osmosis only works with the grenade ability usage. If that was also updated to include melee, I think there'd be a really strong utility role here with Pugilist and Osmosis, but as it stands, Demo and Osmosis is really the only utility combo that we have that uses Osmosis to its fullest extent. So again, you could do something with Subsistence in light of this. If you wanted to pair it with Osmosis, Compulsive Reloader obviously is fine. There is some synergy in Well-Rounded in that using your grenade to proc Well-Rounded will also proc Osmosis as well, but again, you can also proc Well-Rounded just by using a charged melee to hit a target. So it's up to you, but again, Well-Rounded, you don't need to boost the range stat. You do get 10 stability and 10 handling per stack. That can be helpful, but this weapon, especially on M&K, is going to be pretty stable, so I don't find a column 3 perk that just gives me stat bumps to be extremely useful here. I'm more interested in getting ability energy or damage or something else like that. So those are my recommendations. Pugilist, Swash, Osmosis if you're looking for a good auto rifle with Osmosis there for a bit of a utility role in the mid to long range. But yeah, this weapon has been around for a while now, several Festival of the Losts. There hasn't been too much updating. And yeah, like I said, there's a lot of kinetic precision auto rifles to choose from, including a craftable one in Firefight. So there's not a need to go get this Braytech Werewolf. Court, what can you tell us about Jurassic Green?
Yes, this is it's another reprise weapon here, and this was introduced last year, if I'm not mistaken, 2021. It is the Solar Rapid Fire frame, and that's a 540 RPM pulse rifle. The frame bonus is 0.8 reload speed scaler, so that is a 20% faster reload speed when the magazine is empty. Now, when we're looking at the stats here, Jurassic Green is really low. It's pretty, bottom tier in terms of stats. So we're going to be comparing it with, it is the only non-Sunset Solar rapid fire frame here, so we'll pair it with some other elements. I've chosen Horror's Least, Grid Skipper, and Darkest Before. Horror's Least is probably its main competitor here. That is still acquirable anyway for the next couple of seasons. But yeah, it's pretty low stats here. 27 range, we're talking very low considering Darkest Before and Horror's Least have 34 range. Stability is also really low at 41. The highest here, again, Horror's Least at 49. Handling really low as well, 19. Oof. 27 reloads, 76 aim assists, compared to Horror's Least, which is the highest at 82, and 50 recoil. That's really, really bad. The best recoil direction weapon here would be Darkest Before at a big 64 chunk, but it's all these stats really low compared to its competitors here. It does beat Darkest Before by 1 in aim assistance, but that's it. So despite its incredibly low stats, its perk pool has access to some really viable and top tier PvE perks to make up for it. Pretty big glow up for it, because when it came out, it was pretty, it had some decent potential. Frenzy was there, multi-kill clip was there, Adrenaline Junkie was there, and they're all still there just now. But you had some really, pretty sub-tier perks in terms of PvE anyway. But let's look at some barrels and magazines here. So due to the low stats, we're going to sort of really build into the high stat gains from barrels. It really depends what you want to build on, but I'd suggest going recoil and stability just to really put those stats back up to a manageable level. Again, this is a rapid fire frame, so you want to capitalize on that recoil and stability. So barrels, you can go for arrowhead break if you want. That's plus 30 recoil, so that brings it up to 80, and you do get a plus 10 handling. Chambered compensator is plus 10 stability and plus 10 recoil, though it is a minus 5 handling, brings you down to 14. Maybe not ideal if you're going to be swapping, and that does affect your aim down sight as well. Alternatively, if you want to go for some range, you can go for small bore, which is that plus 10 stability and range, or extended barrel, which is plus 10 range, plus 10 recoil, but that also tanks your handling quite substantially. For magazine, I think high cal rounds is always a solid choice for staggering. It does get that plus 5 range. You could go for ricochet rounds, which is plus 15 stability and plus 5 range. Or armor piercing rounds for that 5% increase to combatant shields. It does give you that plus 5 range as well. And just as a highlight here, it does include champion shields. So next time we get barrier pulse, really strong choice. But the big sort of main event here are the column 3 and 4 perks, and there's a lot of great choices here. I will just put a little reminder: we have lost a few perks from before, but not of much worth. Dragonfly was there, Wellspring, Unrelenting was in the previous one, but we've had some great additions here. For column 3, I think the go-to will be Subsistence, just to circumvent that really poor reload. If you're putting a lot of damage down range, you'll completely circumvent with Subsistence. Just as a reminder, that refreshes the magazine by 10% every time you on a weapon kill. So as long as you keep killing those ads, you'll get your ammo back. You could opt for Perpetual Motion, which is another sort of solid choice for stacking up your stability, handling, and reload bonuses. You could pair with Tunnel Vision. Again, this is getting in more into PvP range here, but this could be paired with your aim assistance bonuses from the Origin trait, or you could go for Killing Wind, which is for that mobility and handling bump. That's on weapon kill, you get 20 range, 50 mobility, 40 handling, and a 5% increased damage fall of distance. Column 4, though, really, we're kitted out here. This is Solar 3.0 dream. We have Incandescent. We've got Frenzy here as well. We've got Golden Tricorn and Adrenaline Junkie. Adaptive Munitions is here. I just wanted to point it out, but it does take up that valuable damage perk slot. And we have had pulse rifles and other weapons that have had Adaptive Munitions drop in the column 3 slot. And again, just another highlight related to barrier champions. Adaptive Munitions does work on them. Again, whenever we get barrier pulse rifle, this may be a really strong choice just to shred through those barrier shields. So for masterwork, range or stability, I think stability is probably the best one here. There's this kind of back and forth between PvE players, whether they want range or whether they want stability, but I think for this particular pulse rifle, stability would be the best play if you can get it. And for the mods, it's just bog standard spec mods, minor for ad clear and major for champions. I've got 3 builds here to talk about. Build number 1, Subsistence and Frenzy. That's your really sort of standard classic combo. You do miss out on the reload bonus from Frenzy, which is a plus 50, but you may you may get some use of it if you start running out of ads to kill and you don't proc subsistence as much. But Frenzy for that 15% increased damage and 50 handling, really powerful combo. Next up for our second ad clear, it's Subsistence and Golden Tricorn. Solar across all of these subclasses have some great melee and grenade synergy, so you can get that powerful 50% damage buff when you're at Golden Tricorn ×2. For the third ad clear, we've got Subsistence and Incandescent. Another great solar pairing. Build heavily into the whole Scorch and Ignite verbs to really exploit this pairing. And just as a reminder, Incandescent on weapon kill applies 30 or 40 with Ember of Ashes, Scorch to nearby enemies. Powerful combatants increases the range to 8 meters. So it's a smaller one when you're using it against minor enemies. And yeah, you could really pair that against, your solar verbs. Just have a little double check here. Let's have a look. So for Scorching, you could pair it with Ember of Char. So your ignition spread scorched nearby enemies, synergize into the whole ignition play. You could get Ember of Searing, which gives you that melee ability energy regen. You could use Ember of Singeing for applying Scorch, grants you class ability regen. A lot of build potential here with pairing the whole, solar verbs with Scorching and Igniting. You could swap out Subsistence in any of these builds and put in a column 3 perk like Perpetual Motion or something like Killing Wind if you so desire. And then you can utilize subclass aspects and fragments like On Your Mark for Hunter on the Solar Hunter for stat boosts instead. So there's a lot of play, there's a lot of kind of avenues you can take. I think, as I said at the start, Jurassic Green certainly had a massive glow up compared to its previous appearance. And some solid choice here, and one I am chasing currently. So what weapons are we chasing then, Saint Impetus?
I'm really interested in that Golden Tricorn on our Dino gun here, Jurassic Green. BXR Battler's kind of locked down Solar Pulse Incandescent shenanigans with me, so just having Pugilist and Demo on Column 3 on Battler makes it really, really, really hard for me to consider anything else, but Battler does not have Golden Tricorn, so that's what I'm checking out on Jurassic Green. For Macabre, probably just going to go the classic, either triple tap Vorpal or auto loading Vorpal. Really, I think those are going to be fine. I think I always get the names confused. Is Adored the Arc one and Beloved is the Solar classic one? I've used Adored as my Arc sniper rifle of choice just because it's had Vorpal and triple tap. But I won't say no to this one. It sounds great. I love the aim down sight scope look of it. So yeah, I think I'll probably see if I can get a roll to drop. But if not, I've got Adored in my back pocket. So not the end of the world. How about you, Saint?
Yep, I as a avid Frenzy enjoyer, I'm definitely looking for Perpetual Motion and Frenzy or Sub and Frenzy on the Jurassic Green. I do really want the Volt Shot sniper though. That's just something unique, and I think it'd be kind of fun. Not necessarily like the best damage dealing roll ever, but being able to apply Jolt from so far away like Tarnished Metal can is for sure valuable, and I would like to have one of those. And I also am looking for a Macabre Ray with an extra handling as well as the snapshot opening shot for Crucible, because I use Occluded Finality quite a bit in the Crucible, but there are some maps and situations where I would just prefer to have 13 points lower zoom. So definitely going to be farming that out. The auto rifle werewolf, it certainly is there, and
it exists.
It does, and it does drop. I have seen it, but that's all I gotta say for that one. I don't know. And I think Frenzy. Court mentioned this, but because it gives you like literally double the handling than it has at base is also like so valuable for something like Jurassic Green that doesn't have
anything,
the best,
anything at all.
Yeah.
Nothing. The stats are 0, basically.
But yeah, I mean, not a bad set of weapons. All in all, pretty good. I mean, and it's also a pretty good mix of like PvP, PvE utility, because I think that I think Werewolf is set up to be a bit of a laser in the Crucible, right? So I'm sure that some people will gravitate towards that for Crucible play, but yeah, not much in PvE for that one. But yeah, you know, all in all, general set of weapons is solid, and the sound of the sniper rifle. Wow, you know, as somebody that grew up watching, you know, Gundam and Big O on Tsunami, like hearing that sound is just absolutely fantastic. Really takes me back. Big ups to whoever the audio engineer was on that one.
Yeah, we'll need to fit a small Q&A question in next week just to say, okay, who made that sound design?
Who did
it's
this?
not in the scope of the Q&A, but we need to know. Because it's just amazing. Like, it's just that, like, crispy, clean noise. And like, I'm a big fan of weapons that have these unique sounds. I always bring up like Sunshot and Graviton Lance because they've got that really like Destiny, really alien sounding noise, and it's just really satisfying to hear. And when I heard that both in first person and in third person of the Macabre, I was just like, oh, this is great. I just need to use this. And you know, snipers aren't in a, you know, they're a pretty weird spot for PvE. So I want to get a nice role for PvE, just, you know, to take in to a future sandbox where snipers are a little bit more useful, shall we say.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no notes on the sound design. That is perfection right there. All right, fellas. I think that wraps up episode 37 of Podcast versus Enemies. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our audio engineer, MisterSudden, for his work behind the scenes. Remember, next week is our interview with Vivian and Chris, so stay tuned for that episode. We are looking forward to it. And we will return with the rest of the GM breakdowns afterwards, and of course any coverage of Season 20 as Season of the Plunder starts to wind down. Until then, my name is Impetus. You can find me by that name on Discord and in Destiny, and as Impetus always on Twitter. Court, where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter as @CourtProjects, on Discord as Court, and you can find my documentation and various other community source spreadsheets and applications to enhance your Destiny experience over on the Massive Breakdowns website. Saint, where can we find you?
Yep, my name has been Saint Kabir. You can find me by Saint_Kabir on Discord, YouTube, Twitch, etc. Thank you to everybody for listening in to another episode of PvE.